Hey everyone, I'm so glad you're here. Please like and subscribe to the channel to give me more motivation to tell more interesting stories. Now, let's begin. You are born into a world already shaped to control you. South Africa, 1918. You are named Lala Troublemaker. And while no one can know just how true that will become, you carry the name like a quiet prophecy. The British schoolteacher gives you the name Nelson because apparently Lala is too much syllable for empire. That name will follow you into history. But right now, you are just a barefoot boy, running in the Eastern Cape, herding cattle and dodging authority with a grin. You grow up absorbing stories of resistance and justice and old wars waged by ancestors who were forced to bend the knee but never quite broke. At the University of Fort Hare, you learn more than books can teach you. Learn how easily dignity can be threatened by power. One student protests later, you're suspended, so naturally you run away. To Johannesburg, a city where gold is king and skin color is destiny. You wear suits now. You walk tall, even as laws push your people into corners. You study by candlelight reading law while buses roll past with whites-only signs on the windows. And one day, you walk into a courtroom, not just to listen, but to stand, to argue, to defend. Not yourself, not yet. Others first. A mainstream historical fact, Mandela earned his law degree through correspondence while working full-time. He and Oliver Tambo founded South Africa's first black-owned law firm, offering low-cost legal help to black clients harassed under apartheid laws. But courtrooms you find are not enough. The system is too big, too brutal, too organized. It crushes arguments with batons and paperwork. So you join the African National Congress. At first you march peacefully. You speak into microphones. You wear ties and pin badges to your lapel. You believe you can reason with a government that believes you shouldn't exist beyond a labor quota. You organize boycotts. You lead strikes. You watch police drag men away clubs, raised no questions asked. And then one day, the state murders 69 black people in Sharpeville for standing in protest. Most of them were shot in the back. Historians still argue whether that massacre marked the moment when South Africa's liberation movement fully turned from peace to sabotage. But for you, it's not academic. It's personal. Sharpeville doesn't just kill bodies, it kills the last shred of your faith in polite resistance. You go underground. You study guerrilla tactics. You help form Umkhonto, We Sizwe, the spear of the nation, the ANC's armed wing. You speak of justice, but also of disruption. You don't want to kill. You want the regime to feel vulnerable, to know what it's like to sleep lightly. Ears tuned for the distant thud of conscience. You wear disguises, travel in secret. They call you the Black Pimpernel, and you kind of enjoy it right up until the government catches you. A quirky tidbit, Mandela once disguised himself as a chauffeur to evade the police, complete with overalls and a fake mustache. For weeks, he slipped past checkpoints while planning underground operations until the disguise finally gave out on a country road. You are arrested. Again. This time it's serious. You know the charges before they say them. Sabotage, conspiracy, communism, treason. You stand in the dock and look into the eyes of men who already see you as guilty. And then you speak, not to beg, not to deny, but to declare. You say, I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The room goes still. The world outside begins to listen. but the cell door still slams shut. You sit in a prison cell, but your mind walks free. The guards call you by number now, 44664. That's your identity, reduced to digits and dust. But you don't flinch when they bark it. You look them in the eye, you nod, and you bide your time. You're on Robben Island, off the coast of Cape Town, where the wind never stops screaming, and the walls don't need barbed wire to feel like a trap. You break rocks, literally, all day, under the white sun swinging a pick into limestone that blinds your eyes and shreds your lungs. It's not just punishment, it's strategy. Because blind men don't read, and leaders who can't breathe can't lead. A mainstream historical fact, Robben Island was used to isolate political prisoners from the outside world. Inmates, especially black political activists, were subjected to harsh physical labor, minimal privileges, and complete isolation from current events. But you don't let it erase you. At night you write, on scraps, on your soul. Your letters go through censors, often blacked out like secrets, but even the fragments carry hope to your wife, your children, your people. You teach fellow inmates law and language. You debate philosophy during exercise breaks. You laugh sometimes. Even in prison you lead. Historians still argue whether your time in prison radicalized you further or tempered your fire. But anyone who spent 15 minutes in your company knows one thing. This is not the fire that destroys. This is the fire that refines. You grow older, but your legend grows faster. Protesters in London chant your name. Students in Soweto spray it on walls. Even your enemies in Pretoria start to shift in their seats when you appear on news broadcasts, gray-haired, firm-voiced, unshaken. And still you refuse to compromise. They offer you release not once but 6 times, each time with strings. Give up the violence, they say. Apologize, they say. Acknowledge the state's authority, they say. You say nothing that softens truth. A quirky tidbit, one of Mandela's release offers included a bizarre clause that he relocate to a black homeland and live in exile under surveillance. He responded with a handwritten statement smuggled out of prison. Only free men can negotiate. You walk the prison yard like a monk, not a man defeated. And in time, even the guards, once brutal, sarcastic, indifferent, begin to shift. One brings you extra bread, another a newspaper folded inside his coat. Eventually, some of them call you, not by your number, but by your name. One asks you quietly, "Will you really forgive us?" You don't answer. Not yet. Forgiveness, after all, requires context. The sun still rises each morning over Robben Island, and you still rise with it. Your daughters are grown now. One doesn't recognize you the first time she visits. You study the face of your wife, Winnie, through a smeared glass pane and wonder if you both still know the same pain, or if yours have diverged into 2 parallel wars. And then in the outside world, the dam breaks. The protests swell. The boycotts tighten. Sanctions bite. The Cold War shifts, and South Africa's apartheid architects realize they've been standing on borrowed time. You get a visitor, a real one, not a lawyer, not a guard, but the president of South Africa. He sits across from you in a suit too tight for sincerity. You pour tea. It is the strangest tea party since Alice tumbled down the rabbit hole. You speak softly, firmly. You talk about land, about law, about unity, not as a slogan, but as a structure. Historians still argue whether F.W. de Klerk freed you out of moral awakening or political survival. But what matters is this: he blinked first. You are told quietly, carefully, that you will be released. You nod, and then go back to your cell for one more night. Because dignity moves on your time, the sun rises like any other. But this time, the gate opens. Not a creak, not a groan. A swing, deliberate and wide, as though even the hinges knew this moment would matter. You walk out. Your spine is straight. Your steps are measured. Winnie is beside you, gripping your hand, not just for love, but for gravity, because the crowd ahead of you is seismic. Thousands, on rooftops, on railings, in trees, holding signs, holding babies, holding their breath. You smile, but not the kind that says, "I'm back." It's the one that whispers, "Now we begin." A mainstream historical fact. On February 11th, 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from Victor Verster Prison after 27 years. His walk through the gates was broadcast live, and millions around the world watched history unfold in real time. The first thing you notice is the noise. Cars, cameras chanting. You haven't heard unfiltered chaos in nearly 3 decades. It rings in your ears like a freedom bell, too loud and too beautiful to silence. The second thing you notice is the air. It's electric, but it's not clean. There's tension under the joy, like a city balancing on a wire just waiting to tilt, because not everyone is cheering. Some fear you, some resent you, some expect you to be vengeance with legs, and you carry none of it. You speak not of war, but of negotiation, not of retribution, but of reconciliation. You go home, whatever that word even means now, to streets where even children chant your name. But the walls there hold the shadows of old betrayals. While you were behind bars, Winnie changed. The movement changed. You must now learn what remained loyal, what twisted, and what survived only in myth. Historians still argue whether your release marked the beginning of the end of apartheid or the start of an even more complex struggle for Black South Africans. But for millions that walk through the prison gates felt like a sunrise. You take to the microphone, the first public speech in nearly 3 decades. You speak like a man who's been having this conversation in his head for years. You say, "I stand before you, not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you the people." A quirky tidbit. That day, you almost missed the live speech altogether. The press van broke down on the way to Cape Town City Hall. Your team had to find a last-minute backup ride. So yes, the first message from the Free Mandela almost got derailed by a flat tire. When you speak, the crowd doesn't just listen. They breathe in your words. And then you do something dangerous. You call for peace. You say you are not bitter. You say you are not broken. You say South Africa has a future, but only if her people are willing to live with those they once feared. Behind you, aides flinch. This is not the fire and fist rhetoric they expected. Some allies think you're soft, that 27 years behind bars have polished your edges too smooth. But you're not interested in edges. You're interested in bridges. You meet with the white government, the same one that caged you. You shake hands with men whose policies carved grief into every Black family in South Africa. And you do it in front of the cameras. The press goes wild. Supporters cry. Critics rage. But none of it matters as much as the truth. You are not negotiating your freedom anymore. You're negotiating a nation's rebirth. In the quiet of your new home, you breathe. You sip tea. You read newspapers. And then you circle names. Because it's time to build a coalition, not just a party. You need thinkers, organizers, peacemakers, even former enemies. It's time to prepare for the impossible. You're going to run for president, And if the people will have it, you'll win. The campaign trail is no red carpet. It's potholes and parades. It's shacks and stages. It's handshakes that end with trembling promises and hugs that last too long to be political. You travel across townships, rural lands, and cities shaped like steel cages, shaking hands with the poor, the hopeful, the bitter, the broken. You are no longer just a man. You are Mandela, a symbol, a myth, a question mark for those who wonder whether you'll unite or unravel what comes next. A mainstream historical fact. South Africa's first fully democratic election was held in April 1994, with over 19 million citizens casting their votes. It was the first time Black South Africans had the right to vote. And yes, you vote too. For the first time in your life, you stand in line for hours beside a grandmother who clutches her ID like scripture and a teenager whose eyes are wider than their future. And when you cast your ballot, you don't smile. You breathe slowly, as if your lungs need to learn what freedom tastes like. The opposition. They worry you'll bring chaos, that you'll flip the tables of justice and replace them with revenge buffets. Some even threaten civil war. But you speak again and again and again about peace, about patience, about building, not breaking. A quirky tidbit. You used to joke that campaigning was harder than prison. At least in prison, you said you weren't expected to kiss babies' pose with chickens or smile on command. You are on posters, mugs, t-shirts. Children run up to you screaming, "Tata," a term of respect and affection. Even some white South Africans, skeptical and stiff, begin to soften. They see you on TV with your quiet voice, your measured words, your smile that somehow says you are safe without even trying. But behind the scenes, it's chaos. Factions argue, allies grumble, expectations are sky high, and reality is holding a rusty measuring tape. You mediate everything from taxi wars to land disputes between campaign stops. You barely sleep. Historians still argue whether South Africa was truly ready for democracy in 1994, or if it was Mandela's sheer presence that held the transition together like duct tape over a cracked dam. Either way, everyone knew. Without you, things fall apart. Election day arrives. You wear a crisp suit, not flashy, not regal, just enough to say this is the moment. You cast your vote and cameras flash like a lightning storm. Then you wait, and you remember the stone you broke on Robben Island, the death sentence that didn't land, the 10-minute visits behind glass, the smell of prison soap, the day the guards asked you to sign a release that felt like surrender, the nights you wrote letters you knew would never reach your daughters. And then you win. The numbers roll in. The people cheer. You are the first Black president of South Africa, not a king, not a conqueror, a bridge. Your inauguration is attended by kings, presidents, former prisoners, and former prison guards. From Beyoncé to the Queen, everyone wants a seat. You speak on a stage surrounded by roses and rifles, and your words are simple, humble. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. You don't say I won, you say we did, and that's the difference. Now the real work begins. Being president sounds glamorous until the phones never stop ringing, and the country is a puzzle with half the pieces on fire. You sit in the Union buildings, now overlooking Pretoria. Once these halls held only white faces, white power, white rules. Now you walk through them, in silence taking it all in, not like a victor, but like a custodian of something borrowed fragile and newly alive. You don't redecorate. You don't paint over the past. You keep the same offices, the same creaky desks, even the same teacups. Because pretending apartheid never happened doesn't heal it. Acknowledgement does. A mainstream historical fact: Nelson Mandela deliberately chose to serve only one presidential term, 1994 to 1999, stating he wanted to ensure democratic precedent, not dynastic power. It was a rare political move in a world of leaders who often cling to power indefinitely. So you lead, yes, but you also teach. You build a government of unity. You invite your enemies to the table, not to flatter them, but to test them. You put F. de Klerk, your former jailer's boss, as your deputy. People call it foolish. You call it strategic. Your goal is not to punish. Your goal is to unravel hate. You launch the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a court not for vengeance, but for memory. Victims speak. Perpetrators confess. The country listens. Historians still argue whether the commission offered real justice or only emotional closure. But in homes across South Africa, families finally say the names of their lost without fear. Meanwhile, you smile at rugby matches. Yes, rugby. A quirky tidbit. You wore the green and gold Springbok jersey, the symbol of white Afrikaner pride, during the 1995 Rugby World Cup final. You handed the trophy to South Africa's white captain, Francois Pienaar, and called him a brother. The stadium full of white fans chanted your name. That jersey, once a symbol of separation, became a badge of unity in 80 minutes. You knew what you were doing. One jersey, one handshake, one game. It's not policy, but it's poetry. At cabinet meetings, you joke when the room gets too tense. You greet the cleaning staff every morning by name. You bring tea to your assistants when they're sick. You ask your guards about their families. And slowly, the country begins to mirror you. Schools reopen. Voting becomes normal. Books replace bullets in classrooms that once taught only silence. But there are cracks. The AIDS crisis grows. Unemployment lingers. Land reform stalls. You are still seen as the fixer, the father, the face of hope, and yet you know you can't hold it all forever. You are 80 and the days grow heavier. You choose not to run again. One term, that's all. Because you're not here to reign. You're here to set precedent. You tell your people softly that they must now lead themselves. And they believe you because you never promise perfection. You promise the possibility of peace. And then quietly, gently, you begin to step away. Not from responsibility, but from center stage. Because real leaders don't cling. They create space. Retirement looks different on you. You're still shaking hands, still traveling, still smiling with that sparkle that says, I survived history and I'm still in the mood for tea. But now, your schedule isn't dictated by crises. It's shaped by choices. School summits fundraisers. You sit with school children on woven mats and presidents on leather chairs. You know which conversations matter most. Your new mission legacy, not statues, not street names, but people. You launch the Nelson Mandela Foundation, focused on memory dialogue and social justice. You spend your days gathering stories, building archives, opening spaces for South Africans to remember the past without being shackled to it. A mainstream historical fact. The Nelson Mandela Foundation became a global platform for human rights and reconciliation. Mandela used it to push education, health access, and anti-poverty initiatives long after leaving office. But the world doesn't let you rest. You're called to broker peace in Congo, to mediate between Libya and the West, to speak out against the U.S. invasion of Iraq. You, the prisoner turned president, now speak with moral weight heavier than most armies. And sometimes you whisper truth so softly it roars. You criticize injustice, no matter the flag. And when asked why you engage at such an age, you smile and say, because no one else will. A quirky tidbit. Mandela once joked that retirement meant freedom, to be busier than ever. He often appeared at 3 or 4 events per day, well into his 80s, much to the dismay of his overworked staff and his famously punctual wife, Graça Machel. But not everything is warm applause. You watch quietly as some of your dreams are distorted. Corruption creeps into politics. Inequality grows faster than hope. AIDS devastates a generation, especially in the townships. You had urged action. You had pleaded, and still too many had failed to act in time. Historians still argue whether your decision to downplay the ANC's internal corruption, especially in its early years of power, was wise diplomacy or silent compromise. But you speak carefully, always choosing unity over outbursts. Because division is a luxury South Africa cannot afford. You bury loved ones now, old comrades lost too soon. Your son from AIDS. You feel the pull of time heavy like a tide, but your laughter never disappears. It just becomes slower, deeper, like an echo from a wiser place. Children still run to you in malls. They don't call you Mr. President. They call you Tata, Father. It sticks because it's true. You fathered more than a government. You fathered a new idea of what a nation could be. You make fewer public appearances now. Your voice fades softer, slower, but your presence still electrifies a room. When you walk in, heads rise. When you smile, walls fall. You leave the heavy lifting to younger hands. But you offer something rarer guidance without ego. And just when people begin to ask, what will we do without him? You respond without speaking with the most Mandela move of all. You trust them to figure it out. Because real power doesn't hold on forever. Real power lets go and teaches others to hold it well. You are no longer president, no longer required to wake at dawn for briefings, no longer bound by titles or motorcades, and yet somehow your presence has never loomed larger. The world keeps calling. They want you at openings, at galas, at summits. They want your smile on posters, your name on causes, your blessing on every well-meaning mission. You become the closest thing humanity has to a living conscience in a suit. But even as cameras follow you, begin stepping into silence. You spend more time at your home in Kunu, where the hills roll like lullabies and the goats don't care that you once led a nation. You dig in your garden. You play with your great-grandchildren. You chuckle when the power goes out. You've survived worse. A mainstream historical fact. Nelson Mandela retired fully from public life in 2004, delivering a short but unforgettable message. Don't call me, I'll call you. It was a final bow from a man who had given everything, and then some. But people do still call. And occasionally, for something that matters, you answer. When South Africa's leadership stumbles into scandal, your silence becomes a statement. When global leaders stray into arrogance, your humility becomes contrast. And when Barack Obama becomes the first black president of the United States, you write him a letter. Not of advice, but of hope. Historians still argue whether your final decade influenced global politics as much as your presidency. Some say your power faded. Others argue your restraint was itself a form of moral authority. But few deny you were watching. A quirky tidbit. Even in old age, Mandela kept a mischievous sense of humor. Once during an interview, he leaned into the microphone and whispered, "Do you think they still believe I run the country?" At night, you reread old letters, prison correspondence tucked away in boxes. You reread the speech you gave at the Rivonia trial. You run your fingers over the typed pages worn and yellowing like a leaf that somehow survived the storm, and your mind drifts to the limestone quarry, to the cell with a metal bucket in the corner, to the sound of your name chanted on distant continents. You don't cry, you smile, because even in loss, even in pain, you left the world better than you found it, and you did it without rage. You proved something simple, terrifying, and beautiful. That dignity is more powerful than dominance. You meet with fewer world leaders now, fewer cameras, fewer journalists asking the same 10 questions. But when children visit, especially the ones who know only your name from textbooks, you lean in. You ask their names. You ask their dreams. You listen deeply, like the future depends on it, because maybe it does. And sometimes, just sometimes, when you think no one is looking, you close your eyes and breathe deeply, as if exhaling the century from your chest. One long, slow breath. A man no longer chasing freedom, a man resting in it. You feel your body slowing before your spirit does. Mornings come with more aches than ambition. Your once commanding voice now creaks like an old gate in the wind. But when you speak, the world still leans in ears first, hearts second. You've become a living statue, admired, studied, misunderstood, overquoted, but not forgotten. And that's all you ever really wanted. You still smile at children, still make light jokes when you feel the heaviness in a room, still offer tea to guests even if you no longer pour it yourself. Your days are quieter now, but not empty. There are awards, hundreds of them, some etched in gold, others in marble. You nod politely, but in your heart, you know the truest reward is this. You outlived the silence. A mainstream historical fact. By the end of his life, Nelson Mandela had received more than 250 honors, including the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993, and honorary citizenships in countries that once labeled him a terrorist. Funny, isn't it? You remember being on watch lists, being hunted, being branded a danger to the state. Now they name schools after you. Highways, hospitals, babies. You become a myth in your own lifetime, like watching your shadow walk ahead of you waving back. A quirky tidbit. You were once gifted a pair of boxing gloves signed by Muhammad Ali, even though you admitted you had terrible footwork as a boxer. Still, you kept them in your study as a reminder. Always stay in the ring, even if you're not throwing punches. You spend afternoons in your garden, watching the wind carry dust through leaves. Visitors come and go. Family lingers. Old comrades call. Some days you speak. Others, you simply listen, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. And when you do speak, you don't give speeches. You tell stories about cows, about rivers, about the time your guard asked you for advice on his marriage, about the moment you realized a prison cell could be a classroom if the students had heart. Historians still argue what part of your legacy will last longest. Your years in prison, your presidency, or your global symbolism. But perhaps that's the wrong question. The real answer may be it's not about you anymore. It's about what people do with the idea of you. You begin fading from public view. Not because you want to vanish, but because nature insists. And you've always known when to step back. Your last official birthday party becomes a global event. Concerts, dances, messages from presidents, pop stars, and people in tin-roofed homes. You laugh at it all, not out of ego, but out of awe. How did a boy from a small village, barefoot and curious, become this? You never have an answer, but you do have peace. You're not afraid of the end. You've already lived several. Apartheid died. Silence died. Hatred didn't die, but it limped thanks to you. So when you sit beneath a quiet sky, breathing slower than you once did, you know you did not waste your time. The final stretch arrives not like a storm, but like dusk, soft, slow, unavoidable. You are no longer in and out of meetings. No more flashing cameras or foreign dignitaries trying to steal 5 seconds of your time for their photo albums. The world still reveres you, but now it lets you rest. And you do. On a small hill in Kunu, the village of your birth, you sit beneath a tree and think not about power or politics or policies. You think about cows, about rivers, about the way the grass shifts when no one is watching. A mainstream historical fact. Mandela returned to his ancestral home in Kunu during his retirement and expressed his desire to be buried there. It was a full circle moment, ending where he began surrounded by the land that first gave him roots. You've grown smaller, thinner, quieter, but still, when nurses enter the room, they smile differently. When children visit, they stare a moment longer. You're a living lighthouse, flickering maybe, but still visible even through fog. One day, you don't wake as quickly. Another day, you don't speak. And slowly, the hands of time begin pulling you back, not violently, but gently, like a mother calling her child in from the fields. Grassa holds your hand. She's calm. You've made peace with everything, with the pain, with the triumph, with the endless what-ifs. You remember the cell, the limestone dust on your skin, the letters that never made it. You remember the crowd in 1990, the rugby jersey, the ballot paper, the children's faces, and you whisper it was enough. A quirky tidbit. You once said your greatest regret was not spending more time with your family. I was not a good father. You admitted, I placed the nation above the home. Line that broke hearts, but reminded people that even icons bleed. Historians still argue how best to preserve your legacy. Statues, foundations, museums. But you wouldn't have cared about those things. You would have asked, are the people safe? Are they free? Are they learning to love one another? The answer, still in progress. On December 5th, 2013, you pass away. The world stops. Presidents cry. Singers wail. Villages fall silent. Airports pause mid-announcement. News anchors go still. And children ask, who will protect us now? You're buried on a hill with cows nearby. Simple. Sacred. A resting place, not for a hero, but for a man who chose to live fully and forgive fully. And as your coffin lowers into the soil, South Africa does not shatter. It breathes because you taught it how. The dust settles long after your last breath. South Africa begins the long process of mourning, immediate, national, and deeply personal. Not the kind of grief reserved for distant presidents, but the aching sort, like losing a grandfather who always knew exactly what to say, even when he said almost nothing. Flags lower, flowers rise, people gather in churches, schools, street corners, and living rooms. Some wear traditional dress. Some wear t-shirts with your smiling face. Others wear black not for sorrow, but for reverence. The headlines say goodbye Madiba, but it doesn't feel like goodbye because you're still everywhere. A mainstream historical fact. Your memorial service in Johannesburg brought together more than 90 heads of state, the largest gathering of global leaders in modern history. The crowd included Barack Obama, Fidel Castro's brother, Raoul David Cameron, and Ban Ki-moon. Rain poured during the event, a sign of blessing in many South African cultures. The skies cried, they said. Even the clouds mourned. But through the downpour, voices rose, singing, dancing, storytelling, a celebration of a life not just lived, but used well. The world watched spellbound as your casket journeyed across the nation, driven through streets lined with school children, waving handmade flags, chanting your name through tears and laughter. Your face wasn't just on posters. It was in eyes, in hearts, in trembling hands, reaching for something they couldn't quite let go of. A quirky tidbit. Even in death, your humor lingered. Your family joked that your funeral planning had more VIP coordination than the Olympics. You once told Graça, "If too many people show up, just blame me. I always did like a crowd." Historians still argue what your greatest achievement was. Was it surviving prison without bitterness? Leading a divided nation without fear? Leaving office without clinging to power? Or maybe it was something quieter, like hugging a crying mother who lost her son to political violence and saying nothing because nothing needed to be said. Your memory becomes a compass. Activists carry your name into marches. Teachers quote your speeches on chalkboards in faraway places. Students in America, France, Brazil, India whisper your words before exams, before debates, before they raise their hands in rooms that once silenced them. Your foundation continues. Your words continue. Your warnings, your wit, your wisdom still alive in the soil you once walked and in the minds of those you never met. You are no longer here, but somehow you're everywhere. In South Africa, bruised and stumbling still rises. Because, once upon a time, a boy named Rolihlahla became Nelson, then Madiba, then Tata, and finally, a symbol the world could look to, not for perfection, but for possibility. You taught us that prisons can't hold courage, that peace can roar louder than war, that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's armor. And now, as the sun sets on the hill above Kunu, your people do not weep alone. They remember, they rise, they begin again. The sun lowers gently over the hills of Kunu, and a hush settles over the land. It's not silence born of grief, but of something deeper, a reverence, a breath held in collective gratitude, the kind of stillness that only comes when a life has been lived with courage and ended with grace. You, Nelson Madiba Tata, were never just one man. You were a bridge, a mirror, a flame in the dark. And now, in the quiet hours after your story's end, the world softens. Footsteps grow lighter. Voices grow slower. The weight of history so heavy for so long begins to shift, not vanish, but become bearable, because you carried it first, and you showed us how. The roads are still uneven. The nation is still learning how to listen, how to heal, how to hope. But your memory lingers in the spaces between headlines and heartbeats, between thunder and whisper. In the voice of a teacher saying, "Let's talk, not fight." In the hands of a child planting a tree where fences once stood. in the eyes of a leader who chooses truth over triumph. So now we pause, not to say goodbye, but to remember that you are not gone. You are simply resting in the roots of the land, in the pages of the books, in the choices we make each day to be just a little braver, a little kinder, a little more like you. Sleep well, Tata. You've done enough. Thank you for listening to the story.